Welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking about burnout and overwhelm and how you can reclaim who you are beyond your day-to-day responsibilities. Now, have you ever found yourself or caught yourself thinking or saying something like, well, I'm just a dad, I'm only a mom, or I'm just another, employee in this machine that is the company I work for. Like, if you've ever thought those things, like, you are not alone. So many of us have fallen into the trap of defining ourselves solely by the role that we are in, whether that's being a parent or an employee or a spouse or entrepreneur or whatever other label that you've chosen to give yourself. But this, limited view of yourself, it isn't just restricting. Like, it could actually be the root cause of the burnout that you have felt, or the stagnation that you just can't seem to shake, and that persistent feeling that something meaningful is missing within your life. So today we're going to talk about how you can really break free from that narrowing self-definition that you may have. Now, my name is Jake Talbert. I'm the founder and author of this book called The Giver Method. I'll put a link in the description. You can go get it on Amazon. It is an Amazon bestseller. I highly recommend it. It's the best $10 you can invest in yourself, in your family, in your employment, your career, your business, whatever. It will absolutely change your life. Now, if you're not ready to invest the $10 in yourself by getting the book, I'll put a free resource in there as well called The Giver's Roadmap. Go get access to it. There'll be a link down below that you can go get it. Now, I've spent years helping people just like you because I was there. I want to help you to discover that there is so much more than the role that you play. I know what it's like to feel completely defined by your responsibilities. I spent years feeling like I was nothing more than my job title and my duties that I performed as for my family. And that narrow view, it led me to a lot of burnout and disconnection and really a profound sense of something missing, until I discovered how to reframe my identity and to see myself in that as that multi-dimensional person that I truly am. Now, maybe you're feeling completely consumed by your responsibility as a parent, or your entire identity has just been swallowed by the endless tasks of raising children. I mean, if you're like me, you love your children like crazy, but sometimes you may wonder, is this all I am now? Or perhaps showing up to your job day after day that just no longer inspires you, but it's become this entangled part of your identity that you can't imagine who you'd be without it. You feel stuck, but the thought of change in that terrifies you because your work has become who you are, not just what you do. And the problem isn't that your job or your parental responsibilities, it has nothing to do with that. The problem is that somewhere along the way, you started to believe that those roles are who you are as a person. And when you feel trapped in a limited identity, it's nearly impossible to grow or change or find true fulfillment. But what if I told you that you can reframe that identity you have? You could see yourself as so much more than the roles that you have. And the key to breaking free from any burnout is to rediscover your sense of purpose. Now, today I'm going to show you these 6 different principles and steps to help you expand your sense of self beyond your job, beyond your family role. These are going to help you to recognize your unique gifts and superpowers that exist independently of any role that you play. Now, before we dive in, if you are new here, please hit subscribe, ring that bell for notifications. I would hate for you to miss out on any of the content we have on personal growth and discovery, and discovering your superpowers and becoming who it is that you're meant to be, making a greater impact on your family's life or your coworkers' lives, whatever that may look like. You can also go find us on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, or at thegivermethod.com for, if you wanted to have us do speaking opportunities or be a guest on something or other ways that we can help you. You can find all that there. I'll put all the links in the description. Now, let's start this. Let's dive into this, journey that you're going to be on of reframing your identity and rediscovering this multidimensional person that you truly are. So the first step that you have to do, the first principle idea is that you have to separate your doing from your being. You have to reframe your identity. You have to understand there's this critical difference between what you do and who you are. Most of us have unconsciously fused these two concepts together. We define ourselves by our daily activities or responsibilities or roles. We say I'm a mother rather than I'm a parent. Rather than I parent my children. It's I'm a mother, I'm a father. No, I parent my children. I raise my children. They're actions I do. We'll say I'm a manager. It's or you could say I currently work in a management position. There's just subtle linguistic differences but it has a massive psychological effect on you, and that's the trap that people fall into. When you define yourself by what you do, your entire sense of worth and identity becomes dependent of the performance in that role. And that's exhausting. Like it can be so exhausting for you. I've been there. Like when you fuse the fusion between doing and being creates this enormous pressure in your life. When you believe that you are your role, then any failure or challenge in that role feels like personal failure. Any criticism in your work feels like criticism of your worth and your human being. Even this fusion, it leaves no room for growth or change. That's the only way of putting it. Like, if you are your job, then who would you be if you lost your job or your career changes? If you are solely a parent, then who do you become when your children grow up or leave home or make a stupid decision? Because that happens. Like, then this narrow identity is going to create that fragile foundation of your sense of self and leaves you so much more vulnerable to existential crisis whenever life transitions occur. So what you want to do is you need to start by just examining the language you use. Like, notice when you say I am followed by any sort of a role. I'm a teacher, I'm a father, I'm a nurse. Practice rephrasing to create that separation. Instead of saying you would say I work as a teacher. I work with kids daily at the elementary school. I have a role of a father. I am raising children. I practice nursing. This simple shift, like I said, the psychological space between your essential self and the roles you are, it's going to totally change how you look at it, and you're going to live way more fulfilled life. Pay attention to how it feels. How many people report this almost immediate sense of relief and expansion when they create that distraction. And then next, you can create a list, get a piece of paper and do a 2-column list of what I do versus who I am. And in the first column, list all your roles, responsibilities. I'm a parent, I'm an employee, I'm a volunteer, I'm a church leader, I'm a whatever. And then the second column, you're going to list the qualities that describe your essential self, regardless of any role. Perhaps I am curious, I'm compassionate, creative, determined, empathetic, problem solving. Add this list, add to this list throughout a week, and notice how the aspects of being, that remain consistent across the context of the roles. This sort of an exercise, it helps you recognize that, your essential self, it exists independently from any position you hold or a function you perform. And you can take action this week by introducing yourself to new people in this new way. Instead of sharing something instead of sharing your role, share something about your values, your interests, your qualities, and notice how it changes the conversation and your own sense of self during the interaction. See how it's going to shift the perspective and the quality of the connection that you start to establish. It's so important because society constantly reinforces these role-based identities from the moment we meet someone new, and the question is well, what do you do? We reinforce the idea of our worth is tied to some sort of productive output for social roles. Now, when you condition, the societal conditioning there, it runs deep in our conscious. It's going to take some time and effort to separate this. Without that separation, though, you're going to remain trapped in that performance-based identity and never truly find fulfillment or security. We may want to try to avoid new things. That's not who I am. We may try to reject opportunities that aren't falling into the established identity box that we have. By separating it from, separating it from your being, in the role, you create the freedom to explore all these new dimensions of yourself without that identity threat. Trying new activities, developing new skills, even if you fail at them, without diminishing your sense of who you are. It's yeah, it happened. I tried it. I gave it a try. This sort of psychological freedom is the foundation for growth and transformation, and really the first step to reframing your identity and relieving all of that overwhelm and frustration and stress that you've been having that leads towards that burnout. Now, the second one is that you have to really, before you became a parent, rushing between, whether it's school drop-offs or soccer or football practices, before you became the employee climbing a corporate ladder, before you assumed other defining roles, you were a person with unique talents and dreams and passions. And so you have to start to find what were those pre-roll, how do we excavate them out, these pre-roll passions? Because many of these authentic aspects of yourself, they didn't disappear. They're just simply buried under the weight of the responsibilities and expectations that you've created for yourself. Think back to what excited you before you had that identity. like before that really became solidified? What'd you lose yourself doing? Like what activities made time just fly by? Like these roles, like pre-roll passions that you had, they're not just nostalgic moments, they're actually clues to the authentic self that exists independently of any current role or responsibility that you have. Many people experience like this insane disconnect from their early passions as they take on these adult responsibilities. Like the ambitious artist becomes the practical parent focused on stability. The really adventurous spirit, like it becomes the reliable employee who doesn't take risks at all. Like the passionate advocate for something becomes too busy with the daily tasks to fight for any sort of a cause. Like this distancing from earlier passions isn't just about having less time, it's about gradually accepting that narrower and narrower definition of who you are and what's possible for you. The passions, like they're not childish phrases that you just outgrew. They really were your authentic expression of who you truly are, and they still exist in you. And you just have to go find them and reclaim them and reignite them. So if you want to really get that going, what you do, create that. What's a timeline that you could do where it's like a passion timeline stretching back to as far as you can remember, and start with your earliest memory of being deeply engaged in an activity that brought you joy. Like, okay, what did you love doing? What was it like when you were a child? What captured your imagination as a teenager? What excited you before you currently got into this role-consumed identity that you're in? And for each stage of life, write down the activities or the interests or the dreams that energized you, and then look for the patterns or recurring themes that were there. These are going to point towards those core aspects of your authentic self. And then you then have to start going through and looking for, like, how do I excavate and pull out my passions, based off things. You can experiment with it. So choose an activity from your timeline that still maybe resonates with you that you've been neglecting, and then just commit to spending some time this week, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes doing it. Like if you loved writing, set a timer with zero judgment and just write for 20 minutes. If you're passionate about music, go listen to an album like that used to inspire you. The goal of any of these things, like it's not any sort of a mastery or excellence, it's simply reestablishing the connection with a part of yourself that exists beyond your current roles. Notice how you feel during that, after it, and as you reconnect, pay attention to any sense of coming home to yourself or remembering who you are, and then just take action. Share what you rediscovered about yourself with someone close to you. Talk to them about it. Tell them about what you used to do that you fell in love with and how you felt when you reconnected with it. Ask about what passions they had before their current role. Like these conversations build deep meaning for both people and open the space for that conversation. Consider making some sort of a plan to integrate that even small expression of your passion into regular routines. How do I find 15 minutes twice a week to do something like that and reclaim that part of myself? These passions, they're not frivolous extras to add if you somehow find the time. They're essential expressions of who you are that provide energy and meaning and resilience to you. When you reclaim these buried aspects of yourself, you begin to see possibilities for integration rather than sacrifice. You model it for your children that, hey, maintaining my authentic self is a part of being my whole person. You bring more creativity and engagement to work. These parts of yourself that you rediscover through this process become resources that you can enrich all areas of your life rather than competing with your own responsibilities. Now, our third one is that you need to identify what are my transferable superpowers. So we talked about the Giver method and the Giver roadmap, the two things that I'm going to put links to that you can go get access to. It's about discovering your superpowers. Every person possesses unique gifts, talents, and strengths. I just call them superpowers that, transcend any role that you play. These aren't just a skill that you developed for your job or a parenting approach. They're intrinsic abilities that reflect the authentic way that you engage with the world. You might be naturally empathetic or intuitively creative or exceptionally organized or gifted at seeing the bigger picture. These superpowers, they're transferable. They can become expressed and applied across so many different contexts, roles, and environments. So many entrepreneurs struggle when I talk about what's your superpower, and they tell me what it is. I'm well, that makes sense why you do what you do, why you started your business. How do you use that though in other roles, in other contexts in your life? How would you use that at home? How do you use that superpower if you were at church or if you were with a group of friends? Finding those things, it really does start to struggle with it. The tragedy is that when you define yourself by a role, you often develop that tunnel vision of your own capabilities. If you're a parent, you might recognize that you got patience or emotional intelligence when dealing with your children, but you fail to see how that same superpower transforms your professional life or the community around you. If you're focused on your career so much, you might value like analytical thinking and problem solving, your abilities at work, but not recognize that these are strengths that could enrich personal relationships or creative pursuits. Like when this compartmentalized view that people have of their superpowers, like it artificially limits both your self-perception and the impact that you could have in all these different areas of your life. So if you want to fix that, you want to change it, begin by doing that inventory of what your strengths are. Identify what the superpowers are. Like what comes so easily to me that others might find challenging? What do people come to me for help on? What do I get compliments for? Even when I'm not trying hard, like it just seems to be something that's easy. Where's that flow state where just time seems to disappear? Find those things. These questions help you identify those innate superpowers rather than, acquired skills. And then don't limit your thinking to like professional capabilities. Like how do these strengths show up in your relationships or your hobbies or community involvement? And then enlarge it, like take it and say, well, great, let me like find my superpower cross-pollination. Like how can I use these strengths that I've identified, intentionally in these other aspects? How do I apply them to the context where I haven't previously been recognized for them? Like if you're naturally empathetic with your children, how could that superpower show up in a professional environment? If you're a gifted problem solver, how might that show up in family challenges or a community issue? Like just create those specific examples how each superpower you could use in these different contexts to create value. Like look for 2 to 3 different contexts of your life that you could do that in, and it starts to help you to expand it beyond that. You could also look for feedback from others. Go to 3 to 5 people and find out what they believe your strengths and passions are. What do you think are my unique gifts? What have you seen? When have you seen me at my best? And their responses will reveal some additional details and patterns that we don't often see within ourselves. And then you create a document or you journal like all of the feedback, focusing on the transferable essence of each superpower rather than any sort of a role-specific application. And this is so important because recognizing these transferable superpowers, like it liberates you from that role-based limitation, and it really expands what your potential could be. When you understand how those natural gifts, like they exist independently of any position you hold, you just gain this tremendous flexibility to apply these strengths in new and unexpected ways. That sort of recognition builds confidence that isn't, contingent on any external validation or specific achievements. It's grounded in knowing that these capabilities remain with you regardless of any sort of life transitions or change in your status. This is like it's going to reduce the exhaustion that comes from constantly switching between different personas or allowing you to bring your full self to each context. And when you recognize that the same powers that you have could enrich both parenting or professional life, and you just stop seeing yourself in those sort of domains, and as you stop seeing yourself as competing in those domains, and that you are limiting your resources when it comes to that, and you start experiencing how they can actually enhance one another. Now, our fourth one is that you rewrite your own personal narrative, because we tell ourselves a story about ourselves. The stories we tell, like they shape our identity, our choices, and our, ultimately our lives. Yet so many of us are living according to the narratives that we didn't consciously choose. Like they're just formed by others' expectations, early experiences, or society's narrow definitions of success. And these often invisible narratives operate such powerful scripts in our lives, silently directing like the choices we make and limiting our sense of possibility. Like you might be living according to a narrative like I'm the responsible one who sacrifices for others. I'm the steady provider who doesn't take risks. I'm the person who puts everyone else first. Like these stories can trap you into patterns that no longer serve or reflect who you truly are. What makes these narratives so powerful is that they operate largely outside of any sort of awareness. Like they feel like they're objective reality rather than interpretations of who we've become or who we believe we could be. If you see yourself as just a mom, just a dad, then you're probably consciously choosing this limiting narrative. It's become the default perspective that you have. It limits you to what the responsibilities are and the social reinforcement of that narrow identity. Like until these sort of unconscious narratives are brought to your awareness, they continue to limit that capacity you have to imagine and create a different life. So what you want to do is begin by identifying like, what is my narrative that I've written for myself? Journal about it. And how powerful that could be of a process when you write out, how you would describe yourself to someone who doesn't know you, and pay attention to the roles or responsibilities, limitations that you feature prominently in that description. I've always been, I could never, my role is to, I tried. Like, these are going to be the signs of an embedded narrative and elements that are constraining your identity. So write out what it is right now. Maybe even in third person, you could go write it as if you were describing a character of a story, which creates that, maybe distant examination of who you are. And then look for how you can consciously craft an alternate version of that narrative that expands the sense of identity while still honoring the values and commitments that you have. It isn't about rejecting responsibilities or roles in any way. It's about creating that broader, more empowered context within them. So write this alternative narrative in detail and include how this expanding identity might approach challenges or make decisions, or how it might relate to others. And then take action by living along that new narrative throughout, just narrative bridging within your life. You identify the actions, however small they may need to be, that you could take this week that align with this new expanded narrative that you have, but doesn't feel completely, natural right away. And start to put that into place. The key is choosing actions that feel slightly uncomfortable because they challenge your old narrative, but are small enough that they're doable. And then build a sequence of these and bridging actions that you could do gradually to help you embody your new and expanded story. And you're going to want to revisit this every so often because your narrative creates the boundaries of what you believe is possible for yourself. I'm just a parent, I'm just an employee. Your brain filters out any opportunity that could be coming your way. You literally fail to notice the options that don't fit or that established narrative of who you are and dismiss them as not for someone like me. And by consciously rewriting the story, you include that broader sense of identity and potential. You expand this perceived, this perception of yourself and go and pursue more based off of that. Many people experience the tension between their professional identity and their personal personas, because it's the role of a parent or an individual, between the public persona or the private self. They've consciously crafted that narrative that is negatively competing against itself, and hoping that these different aspects that they can coexist, but they don't actually create the place for that to happen. So when you do this sort of an integration, it reduces exhaustion and compartmentalization, and it creates that sense of wholeness that is energizing and authentic to you. Now, our fifth one, you're going to identify expanding experiences. So we talked about I've now written this new narrative and I've started to test these things out. Well, experiences shape your identity more powerfully than the amount of thinking or talking could do. And so you can intellectually understand that there's more than your job or your parent role, but without concrete experiences that help you to see that or show that, they allow you to embody this expanded identity and transform, so that it's no longer theoretical. Identity expressing experiences are deliberate opportunities for you to step outside those familiar roles and engage in life in ways that, challenge your current self-definition. They are tangible evidence that you are indeed more than what your limited role could be. Many people resist these sort of experiences because they feel selfish or impractical or frivolous, compared to real responsibilities. If you're a parent, you might feel guilty taking time for pursuits unrelated to your children. If you invested years in your career, you might be exploring interests beyond your profession, and that might be distractions from your career advancement. This resistance often seems from that belief of identity is a zero-sum game of some kind. And that expanding into these new dimensions of yourself, means that you're neglecting your roles or responsibilities, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So what you want to do is you want to design these low-risk identity experiments that you could do. Make them time-bound experiences specifically chosen to activate aspects of your identity that you've been maybe dormant or unexplored. Ask yourself what roles or qualities or capabilities do I wish I could express more in my life? Perhaps you wish to be more creative or more adventurous or more intellectual or more socially connected. And for each one, design these small experiments that you can do that allow you to experience that within your life. The key is to creating a container that feels safe enough to try these different ways of being without threatening your core responsibilities. And then look for what are the practice, what are my identity dates? You decide these time slots where you're going to intentionally engage in the non-dominant aspects of your identity. These might be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly blocks of chunks of time specifically reserved for nurturing parts of yourself beyond your primary role. And unlike a leisure time, you identify these, that they have an explicit purpose of expanding how you see yourself. It could be a class, it could be videos you watch, books you read, like whatever it may be that helps you to expand past that. The structure and regularity of these dates can ensure that your identity can expand, and it doesn't have to just be a nice idea that never happens due to the demands of your daily life. So you just start by taking that action and moving past that. These identity expanding experiences create these emotional connection and evidence to the challenges that really will challenge your limiting beliefs of that self-concept in ways that of things you can't do. These experiences, they create positive feedback loop that accelerates your identity transformation. Each time you step outside the role that you're familiar with, you discover that you are still competent, you're still valued, you're still yourself, you're still a parent, you're still that employee trying to move up the chain, but perhaps even more vibrant in how you look at yourself, because it becomes easier for you to take steps beyond that. And that evidence accumulates, gradually replacing the limiting beliefs that you have. So start small with these, experiences, bounded experiences and trials, and build on each success that you have and create both the desire and the confidence for that more significant transformation. And then, of course, the sixth one is that you have to practice you have to practice self-compassion while you're doing this, because as you expand your identity beyond limiting roles, it requires you to navigate uncomfortable territory that triggers a lot of self-judgment and resistance. And when you define yourself primarily through specific roles for years or decades and attempt to explore beyond that, it can activate insecurity, guilt, or fear. You might feel selfish for wanting to do more than what your parental role has, or just loyalty to a professional path. You're terrified for the uncertainty that comes when you extend beyond your well-established boundary. But without any sort of self-compassion, this practice of relating yourself, you have to relate to yourself with more kindness during those moments and identify expansion. It could stall, it could have holdbacks. I want to gain momentum though, and it might be painful feelings become evident that people will retreat back to that safety that they have. And so we got to move past the self-judgment and create a particularly strong barrier, because it masquerades as responsibility and realism. We got to move past that. We have to get to that new place beyond where we want to be. What appears to be conscientious commitment to your roles often forms these fear-based self-restriction that actually diminishes any sort of effectiveness in the role. While you're trying to expand yourself, you get limited back to that role, and you lose the renewed energy and positive perspective that comes from that. So you develop an awareness. What you want to do is just start by looking at what are the things that, as I am going through this sort of process of expanding myself, what's my identity related inner critic that I have, the voice that's going to come out? How can I combat that? How do I talk back to it? I want to document my thoughts and pay attention to their tone, the language they use, the fear-based assumptions that are there. That awareness creates space for you to have a critical voice, allowing you to recognize it as a just protective mechanism, not a truth that is going to be there. Next, practice some self-compassion whenever you encounter these things. That voice is going to come. And so you could place your hand on your heart, you could speak to yourself, you could do breath work, understand, tell yourself, hey, guess it's hard to expand beyond my role, but that's what I'm doing. It's what I've wanted for so long. Of course, fear is going to come up. Of course, I'm going to have uncertainty. That's a natural part of growth. That's a natural part of my growth plan. And it's not telling me that I'm doing something wrong. Just telling yourself these things and finding other self-compassionate responses, they help to remove the cycle of that self-criticism that often derails what we're trying to do. And so we identify whatever those things may be. We want to practice maybe a daily mantra, practice breath work, practice visualizations, any sort of those things. Self-compassion creates emotional safety needed to venture beyond the familiar territory that we have while maintaining that connection to yourself. It helps you to identify expansion models that are critical life skill for everyone in your sphere of influence. In this way, your journey becomes this gift to the broader community to create what's possible for everyone, because your personal practice of compassionate identity expansion, it will create that ripple effect, giving others that permission to do it themselves as well. As we've talked here, as we've gone over this over the last little bit, we've explored these 6 principles for reframing identity. And these are just some of the basic ones. Like if I want to reframe my job title, my parental role, my responsibilities, like each of them offers pathways of seeing yourself through these multi-dimensional, ways of the person who you truly are. Someone whose worth and potential extend far beyond any role that you play. Like this expanded view of your identity, it isn't philosophical, like in any way. Like it's actual practical transformation that you can do every single day of your life. When you begin to see yourself as more than just your job or your parental role, you create the space for growth without that guilt. You discover energy that you didn't know that you had, and perhaps most importantly, you model for others, your children, your colleagues, your friends, your family, what it looks like to live as a whole person rather than a collection of responsibilities. Remember, reframing your identity isn't about abandoning your commitments or neglecting any sort of responsibilities. It's about creating the foundation that allows you to fulfill these roles from a place of wholeness rather than limitation. When you parent from an identity beyond, like, I'm just a parent, you become more of yourself to your children. When you work from an identity beyond, like, I'm just an employee, you contribute more creatively. You're more authentic engagement within your job. Your journey to identity expansion doesn't happen overnight in any way, especially when you've spent years defining yourself with such a narrow lens. It's a gradual process of remembering who you are before the roles, recognizing who's beneath them, and then imagining who you want to become as you move forward. These small steps, when you take them constantly, create this massive shift over time, breaking you free from feeling stuck, of the things that weigh you down. So I encourage you to just pick one of these things today and start implementing it. Notice what starts to emerge when you begin to see yourself in, as more roles begin to, fade away and you start to see how you can apply yourself in more places. Pay attention to the energy that's available when you reconnect to those dormant aspects of yourself. And then just approach the whole process with that self-compassion that makes sustainable growth possible. You're not just what you do. You're not just a parent, a mom, a dad, a husband, a wife, an employee, an entrepreneur. Like, you're not that. You're not just that. You are not defined solely by the responsibilities of those things. You are unique and a multifaceted individual with all sorts of gifts and superpowers and passions and the potential to transcend any role that you play day to day. And when you embrace this identity, this expanded identity, you don't just transform your own experience, but you create those ripples of possibility that touches everyone in your life. And so with that, I'll say thank you for joining me today. If this resonated with you in any way, please subscribe. Maybe share this with someone who may need it. I'd love to hear in the comments which of the things spoke to you the most, which one you plan to implement in your life as soon as possible. And until next time, I will just say, remember that seeing yourself is more than just the roles, seeing yourself as more than just the roles you live. It isn't selfish. It's that foundation for, bringing that full authentic self to everything you do and everything you love. Keep giving, keep growing, keep expanding who you are, because the world, the universe is waiting for you to step into who it is that you're meant to be to make that greater impact. And when you do that and deliver value without expecting anything in return, the universe will always pay you back. I promise you that. And so with that, we will catch you in our next video. Have a great rest of your day.